People involved in heinous acts and their behaviors have long been shrouded in mystery. Whether they leave behind unidentified targets or are unidentified themselves, there is a fascination with them that has captured the public's imagination. Number 5. There's no doubt that Henry Lee Lucas is a cold-blooded criminal, but his claims of being responsible for over 600 people is a feat that even most prolific criminals would struggle to live up to. Born August 23, 1936, to mother, Viola, in Blacksburg, Virginia, his beginnings were less than ideal. By the age of 10, he had lost one of his eyes due to infection, and soon after he would drop out of school. His mother was a night street worker who would force Lucas to participate in acts with her clients. Meanwhile, his father was an alcoholic and cared more about drinking than raising his children. It was clear to those on the outside of Lucas's family that Henry was on a dark path from the very beginning. When friends look back in retrospect, they describe he displayed bizarre and creepy behavior that started in his childhood. It didn't take long until Lucas was getting involved in illegal activities of his own, and in 1951, he was responsible for the strangling of Laura Burnsley after she refused to fornicate with him. This gruesome act was the catalyst for young Henry. He'd made the connection with pleasure. Lucas would continue on a crime spree throughout his early adulthood, which saw him in and out of prison for various offenses such as burglary and trespassing. When he was just 24 years old, he turned to the subject of his rage, his mother. During an argument, Henry hit her over the head with a broom, and as she was unconscious, he used a knife to finish her off. He's quoted as saying about the incident, quote, "All I remember was slapping her alongside the neck, but after I did that, I saw her fall and decided to grab her. But she fell to the floor, and when I started to pick her back up, I realized she was gone. Then I noticed that I had the weapon in my pocket." Disturbingly, Lucas only served 10 years for his crime. He was released due to prison overpopulation, which was a common occurrence in the golden era of serial killers. Had he been forced to serve a 20 to 40-year sentence, a lot of lives could have been spared. Between 1971 and 1983, it's alleged by Texan authorities that Lucas was responsible for over 200 people. He was forced to confess to over 213 unsolved cases, all while being bribed for his cooperation. Texas Rangers took advantage of the fact that Lucas had a low IQ and was seen as a people pleaser by nature, so they supplied him with drinks, cigarettes, and junk food after they had initially forced him to confess to the scheme. Lucas gleefully posed for interview cameras as he sat and confessed to numerous different crimes, such as the one of Orange Socks Jane Doe, who we've covered in a previous video. It has since been disproven that Henry was responsible for all of these crimes. However, some of these confessions stuck. While Lucas was given proper legal counsel and recanted over 90% of his confessions, he was still left with 11 charges, to which he was sentenced to capital punishment. This sentence was later commuted to life, and Lucas died in prison in 2001. The mystery is, was Lucas responsible for more than the 11 crimes of which he was convicted? We know that he was fed evidence about the cases to make the interviews more compelling, but this could have served as a great defense for him. Another mystery remains, though. If these 213 crimes were not committed by Henry Lee Lucas, then who is responsible, and why did the Texas Rangers allow them to walk free? Number 4. John Wayne Gacy is a household name when it comes to serial killers. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy claimed the lives of 33 men in Chicago, Illinois, and buried many of his targets in his crawl space. What most people don't know about Gacy is that 6 of his targets are still unidentified. Gacy was given capital punishment in 1994 and went to the grave without revealing the identities of these 6 people. Due to these men being unidentified, they're simply referred to as body numbers, in the order in which they were discovered on Gacy's property. His confession led investigators to dig up his crawl space underneath his house and portions of his garden. Further information about Gacy's unidentified victims is available, such as hair color, eye color, and personal items they were found with. Updated composite sketches have been released of all 6 victims. However, no one has ever come forward to claim any of them. It's believed that these men could have been from out of state or not in regular contact with their family. None of these men match any missing persons records from the time, and police are still trying to piece together the puzzle of their identities decades later. Victims of serial killers are often overlooked when studying the perpetrator and their psychology, but it seems that these does have been further overlooked by those taking interest in the case. If you have any information about any of the 6 unidentified men found on the property of John Wayne Gacy, you're urged to contact your local FBI office or law enforcement officials. Alternatively, you can contact the Doe Network or NCMEC. It's possible that the families of these men aren't even aware that they're missing. It was common during this era for people to walk away from loved ones to set up new lives for themselves, as was common with the hippie movement. It only takes the right person with the right information to come forward, and these men will have their names back and their families will have answers. Number 3. The Highway of Tears, a 725-kilometer stretch of road known as Highway 16 that connects Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia, was home to many crimes between 1969 and 2006. A disproportionate number of First Nations and Indigenous women have been eliminated or gone missing along this stretch of highway, leading to its name, the Highway of Tears. The estimated number of cases along the Highway of Tears ranges from 18 all the way to 83, depending on who you ask. The RCMP was extremely hesitant to investigate the highway in the beginning, and it wasn't until non-Indigenous women were being affected that they stepped in. Due to the areas being remote and impoverished, many women do not own cars or any other form of transportation and are forced to hitchhike to work, or just to get from one village to another. The RCMP have theorized that this is the criminals' main method of finding victims. As of 2006, no new cases were added to what the RCMP are now calling Project EPANA. But that's not to say that the problem of violence has gone away. While the exact amount of victims is highly debated, another mystery that is debated is whether this is the work of just one criminal. Cases as far back as 1969 have been linked to the Highway of Tears, leaving First Nations and Indigenous women's rights activists and investigators alike wondering whether they have more than one criminal on their hands. If the RCMP is in fact dealing with multiple criminals, then they've been incredibly unlucky to stumble across multiple criminals who leave behind little evidence of their crimes. Until these cases have justice and resolution, it's likely we'll never know the truth of whether they're dealing with one perpetrator or many. Number 2. On February 2nd, 2009, a woman was walking her dog in the Arroyo Bank in Albuquerque's West Mesa area when she discovered a human bone. Thinking it was possibly an animal bone, she snapped a picture and jokingly sent it to her sister, who was a registered nurse. Within minutes, her sister replied, and to the woman's horror, the bone belonged to a human. Police were called to the scene and unearthed the remains of 11 women in the West Mesa area. What was once an up-and-coming housing development had now become a dumping ground for New Mexico's serial killer. The women were of different races and ages, and the only thing that connected them was their involvement in street work. With little to no evidence at the crime scene and very few leads, the case soon turned cold. Private investigator George Walker began his own investigation after it was clear that Albuquerque's police simply didn't have the budget to keep the investigation going. Within weeks of investigating the bone collector, he began receiving odd calls and emails from the alleged bone collector. The emails were taunting him and leaving codes to evidence, but so far, these have never been solved. Walker told Vice, quote, "There's a possibility the criminal has come and gone. Serial killers move, that's why they don't get caught. If he didn't get caught, I'm sure there are more victims somewhere. He could possibly be on the loose in New Mexico or even another state." In more recent years, many armchair sleuths have commented that the warning signs for the West Mesa bone collector were there, but ignored. A disproportionate amount of sex workers went missing in the same time frame as the West Mesa victims, but this pattern was never picked up on by law enforcement. The medical examiner was able to identify all of the victims, and they were linked to the missing persons reports. 11 years later, Albuquerque police are still no closer to finding out the truth, With dwindling police budgets and a lack of leads, it may be a long time before we know his true identity. Number 1. A disturbing trend is appearing in Manchester's gay village located on Canal Street, just a stone's throw away from Manchester Piccadilly train station. Between 2010 and 2020, over 80 individuals have been recovered from the canals in and around the gay village. Almost all of the victims are male, and their passing has remained unexplained. Police have given the explanation that these men were under the influence at the time of their passing and simply fell into the canal. The water in the canals is also extremely cold, sending the victims into a state of shock as they thrash around desperately trying to find a way out. Some victims were also found with additional injuries. While the Greater Manchester Police have said that there is no evidence to suggest a targeted attack, the victims' families are fiercely campaigning to find out the truth of what happened to their loved ones. Professor Craig Jackson of Birmingham City University told the Mirror, quote, "It's unlikely that such a high number of cases are the result of just accidents or suicides, as canals are not popular spots, especially for men. 80 people in the span of 10 years is a large number of accidental passings in the Manchester canals. Academics have warned police that these crimes are the indication of a serial killer and must be taken seriously. It's been speculated that the criminal preys upon gay men due to his hatred of them and uses the canals as a discreet way of getting rid of the targets." Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.